Lecture, that is lecture number 7, is related with sanitation, and in this lecture I will mainly talk about some sanitizers, their characteristics, mode of actions and applications. So first, what is sanitizing? So the sanitizing process of food industry is an attempt to reduce the number of microbes on equipment surfaces. Okay, so sanitization is not sterilization. I mean, when we need to sterilize something, we have to kill all the microbes present there. But sanitization don't refers to that. Sanitization means not to kill all the microbes, rather to reduce the number of microbes, reduced uh, down to a accepted level. Okay, so in the food industry, especially the wet surfaces, they provide favorable conditions for the growth of microbes. So sanitizing those surfaces need a special precautions. Okay, so and there are many different chemical agents which are used as sanitizers, but the sanitizers, but the chemical agents which we use as sanitizers should have some desirable properties. So these are the desirable properties that a sanitizer should have. What are those properties? It must be able to kill the target microbes, must be efficient under the condition of use, must be safe for use by operatives applying it. That means it also have to be safe for the working personnel. Okay, must not influence the flavor or odor of foods processed by the sanitized equipment. I mean, that means the sanitizer should not mess around with the flavor and odor of the food. It should not affect the flavor or odor of the food. Must be easily rinsed, leaving no toxic residues. It means after we did the sanitation, the remaining chemical should be easily rinsed off using water. Okay, should be easy to use and should be economic. There are some costly chemicals, okay, which are very efficient actually, and also have this kind of characteristics. But those, but they're costly. So it's important that it should be economic. Very costly chemicals, they are not feasible to use in the industry. Okay. Now, the effectiveness of a sanitizers, it depends on several factors. In other way, there are several factors which can affect the effectiveness of a sanitizer. Okay, such as the type of sanitizer. Okay, all kind of sanitizers, they are not effective against all kind of microorganisms. Okay, different sanitizers, they are effective against different microbes, and also in different environmental conditions. So the environmental conditions also affect the efficacy of sanitizers. Okay, so in against which microbes in which area we are going to use will will we have to think about these factors before we choose the sanitizers. Okay, so what kind of microbes is our target microbes and in which area we are going to use. Then concentration of the sanitizer. Okay, definitely sometimes high concentration they are more effective, very less concentration less effective. Okay, the temperature of the sanitizer, some sanitizer they are more effective in warmer temperature and ineffective in uh, colder temperature. So the method of application, how we'll apply the sanitizer on the place, the target organisms. Okay, so definitely it's very important, right? So some organisms, they are resistance to some, not sensitive towards some to some sanitizer chemicals. Okay, so and some uh, organisms, they are more tolerant against some chemicals. Okay, so the target organisms are very important. So actually, before, like for example, you want to sanitize a food processing plant. So you want to sanitize the different places of a food processing plant. The first thing is you need to study or evaluate what kind of probable microbes can be present there. Okay, so based on the characteristics of those microbes, you have to choose which sanitizers you are going to use. So the most common sanitizers that are used in food processing industry, okay, there this. Okay, there are different types of sanitizers which are frequently used in the uh, food processing industry, and these are the most common of those, right? The quartz, quaternary ammonium salts, iodophores, chlorine based sanitizers, biguanides, acid anionic surfactants, amphoteric surfactants. Okay, so in this lecture I'll not talk about all of these types. Basically I'll talk about these three: quartz, iodophores, and chlorine based sanitizers. Okay, so first let's start with the quartz. So quartz as sanitizer. This is a general chemical formula of the quartz. N represent the nitrogen, R1, R2, R4, four side chemicals, and bound with a anion. Okay, so here R1 is represent alkyl, R2 methyl, R3 benzyl, and R4 cetyl benzyl. Okay, and X is an anion. It can be chlorine, for example, it can be chlorine, bromine, sulfate, acetate, etc. Okay, so what are the properties of quartz? Non-specifically, quartz, they are non-specifically described as cationic surface active agents. Okay, and the cationic part is hydrophobic and the anionic part is hydrophilic, and it that means the quartz, they get absorbed into the surface of bacteria and are more efficient than any other sanitizers used in food industry. That means quartz are most efficient. Okay, and they are strongly antimicrobial. I mean they are very strong antimicrobial agents. They are colorless, odorless, stable, and provide residual antibacterial activity on the treated surface. So residual antibacterial activity means, suppose you have sanitized a surface with quartz. Okay, so even after the, suppose you just have sanitized a surface with the quartz, so it will have some residual effect. Say you have sanitized today, for several hours, even for several days, they can retain their antimicrobial activity. So that means for several hours or day, until a certain time, they can kill the microbes, the contaminated microbes. Okay, and effectiveness at a concentration of 500 to 1000 ppm parts per million. This is actually a very low concentration. That means quartz are effective even at a very low concentration, and most effective at pH of 10 and high temperature. And one example of quartz is this one: N-alkyl benzyl methyl ammonium chloride. And the mode of action of quartz is, how the quartz, they do their effect. At low concentration, quartz mainly have bacteriostatic activity. That means at low concentration they cannot kill the bacteria, rather they can stop the growth of the bacteria. And at higher concentration they show bactericidal activity. That means at higher concentration quartz can kill microbes. Okay, and how they kill the bacteria? They react with the cell membrane, denature some essential proteins, and also interfere in transport system, and they also can cause the cell to burst out, because after application of the quartz, the permeability, cell membrane permeability increases, which can cause the bursting of the cells. Okay, and application, where quartz are used: in aluminum equipment, film, non-corrosion area, odor control area, organic matter, sanitation equipment, walls, etc. Okay, so if we need to sanitize this area or surfaces, in that case quartz are used. Okay, now the quartz have some advantages and disadvantages. So advantages of quartz are: they are stable and have long shelf life, non-corrosive, odorless, colorless, non-irritating to skin, less affected by organic matter, have good penetrating ability. And the disadvantage of quads are they are relatively expensive and not effective against spores, fuzz, coliforms. Okay, and formation of foam during mechanical application. I mean, if we try to apply quartz, foam can form. Okay, which can create problems. Now, another type of sanitizers, iodophores. So, what is iodophore? An iodophore is a combination of iodine and a solubilizing agent, usually a surfactant agent, for example, surfactant like uh, alkyl phenoxy polyglycol ether. Okay, and when iodophore are added into water, free iodine are released. Okay, and properties of iodophores, uh, it possesses not only surfactant and disinfectant properties but also are capable of removing scale. I mean, iodophores, they act as surfactant. They also have disinfectant properties, that means they can kill microbes. Also, I mean, in addition to this, they are also are capable to remove scale. In the industry, various scales are formed, right? So iodophores, some of the iodophores, they can also remove the scale. Okay, and iodophores can penetrate organic soil and are not affected by hard water. Okay, this is a good thing, right? Because if we use hard water for the cleaning or sanitizing purposes, and if we use iodophores, they will be as effective, right? As effective in the I mean, the iodophores will be both effective in hard water and uh, soft water. Okay, and effectiveness at a low concentration of 12.2 to 25 parts per million. That means iodophores are effective at a very low concentration, and at pH 4.6. Example of iodophore, iodophore A, B, C, D, E, etc. I mean, they are just named like this: iodophore A, iodophore B. Okay, and mode of action of iodophore. I mean, how iodophore exert their effect. So germicidal against a wide variety of bacteria, yeasts, and molds. That means they can kill a wide variety of bacteria, yeasts, and molds. So how they kill the microbes? It combines with certain amino acids of enzymes and other cellular proteins. That means iodophore interfere with the different proteins basically, right? Because enzymes are there also proteins. So they interfere or combine with certain amino acids of the proteins and thus can exert their germicidal activity. Like the quartz, iodophores also has some advantages and disadvantages. So the advantages of iodophores are they're stable and have long shelf life, effective against different microbes, not affected by hard water, non-irritating to skin, less affected by organic matter, and have good penetrating ability. And disadvantages are they are also relatively expensive, like the quartz, not effective in alkaline conditions. So if the condition is alkaline, we cannot use iodophore. May cause off flavor and off odor. Okay, that means iodophores they can interfere with the color and I mean the flavor and uh, odor of the food. Okay, form purple compound with starch, high COD in plant toast water. Okay, so these are the disadvantages of iodophores. Now, finally, the chlorine-based sanitizers. Okay, another type of sanitizers, that is chlorine-based sanitizers, and these are the most widely used sanitizers. Okay, chlorine-based sanitizers are very widely used different food industry, and not only in food industry. I mean, in various industry, food industry, even like swimming pool. You know, in swimming pool we also need to do sanitization. So, I mean, chlorine-based sanitizers they are very widely used. Okay, and usually the chlorine-based sanitizers they include sodium and calcium hypochlorite, salts of isocyanuric acid, the hydrogen derivatives, chlorinated phosphates, and chlorine gas. Okay, and it's okay, so these are actually different type of chlorine based sanitizers. So whatever the chlorine based sanitizers is, basically the hypochlorous acid. Okay, I mean all the chlorine-based sanitizers, chlorine-based sanitizers, when they are diluted or dissolved in the water, hypochlorous acid is produced. Okay, and this hypochlorous acid, they actually do the sanitizing activity. Okay, so I mean doesn't matter what type of chlorine based sanitizers it is, basically upon dilution or dissolved into the water, hypochlorous acid is produced or formed, and this hypochlorous acid do the sanitizing activity. Okay, and these are some example of the chemical reactions by which the hypochlorous acid is formed, such as for example even the chlorine gas, if it reacts with the water, HOCl, the hypochlorous acid is produced. NaOCl plus, when NaOCl reacts with water, hypochlorous acid is produced. Now, the properties of chlorine based sanitizers. The hypochlorous acid formation is increased at pH 5 to 6 and below. So that means if the pH is below 6, more hypochlorous acid will be produced. Okay, and carbohydrates and starch are found to absorb or chemically combined with chlorine. Okay, and if effectiveness at a concentration of 100 to 200 ppm, that means parts per million, for surface sanitation. Process water for plant treatment is 0.5 ppm and 0.025 to 2 ppm for potable water. That means based on our purpose, the concentration of chlorine based sanitizers will vary. Okay, such as for example if we want to sanitize potable water, we should use the sanitizer at this concentration. That means we have to use very low concentration. But if we want to sanitize surface, in that case you have to use higher concentration, 100 to 200 ppm. Okay, so it's depend on which surface or area we are going to use the chlorine based sanitizers, and based on that we have to choose at which concentration we have to use the sanitizers. Okay, and now the mode of action, how the chlorine based sanitizers works. Destruction of protective bacterial capsule. That means sanitizers, I mean chlorine based sanitizers, they can destroy the bacterial capsule, cause oxidation of cell protoplasm uh, by forming nascent oxygen, alteration of cell permeability, precipitation of bacterial proteins, prevention of enzyme regeneration. Okay, and like the other sanitizers, the chlorine based sanitizers also have some advantages and disadvantages. Advantages: relatively inexpensive, effective against different microbes, not affected by hard water, harmless residue and do not form film, is easy to prepare and apply, non-staining. Okay, and disadvantages: unstable during storage. Okay, they are not that, I mean chlorine based sanitizers are not that stable. Okay, they can easily get degraded. Corrosive, may cause off flavor and off odor, irritating to skin, affected by organic matter. Okay, so this was about the three different types of sanitizers. This slide, it shows some application of the sanitizers. I mean, based on the area. I mean, in which type of area or condition, which type of sanitizers we should use. For example, in case of aluminum equipment, we can use iodophore or quartz. For bacterial spores, we must have to use hypochlorite, because actually both quartz and iodophore, they are not that effective against the spores. In brewery and beverages, iodophore are used. To kill coliform, we have to use hypochlorite and iodophore. But quartz are not effective against coliform. Okay, right? So equipment before use. So suppose we just want to clean the equipment before we are going to use them. We should hypochlorite and iodophore at the sanitizers that are used for equipment store, quartz, fogging atmosphere, hypochlorite and iodophore, hand sanitization, iodophore, high iron water, iodophore. Okay, for low cost applications. Suppose we cannot we don't have money. Okay, so we cannot spend lots of money for the sanitization. In that case, we should use hypochlorite, non-corrosive quat. Okay, because the hypochlorite, they are corrosive. Okay, even iodophore, some they are corrosive. So if we don't want any corrosion, we have to choose quat. Okay, odor control, quat. Organic matter, quat, because organic matter can interfere both with iodophore and the chlorine based sanitizers. For wall, quat, hypochlorite. For water treatment, hypochlorite. Okay, so these are some area and the recommended sanitizers that we have to use to sanitize these different areas. Okay, so now when we do sanitation, there are certain things that we should do and certain things that we should not do, such as, for example, many sanitizers, they are in powder form, so and this powder can adulterate or contaminate the food products. Okay, so we have to be careful when we during handling with the sanitizers. Okay, and the containers of the sanitizers should be labeled properly and perfectly. Okay, this is important. Otherwise, mistakes can occur, and the sanitizer should be stored in a locked area or room well separated from food process or storage area. Okay, so to avoid all kind of contaminations from the sanitizers. Okay, so the sanitizers, they can contaminate our food, right? So that's why they should be well separated. The area where we will store our sanitizer should be well separated from the food processing and storage areas. Okay, and ventilation should be provided, because otherwise, many sanitizers, they can produce irritating gas. Okay, so if there is not proper ventilation, the area can be very discomfortable, even sometimes dangerous for the working personnel. Okay, and when uh, you have finished the containers, you have used all the sanitizers of a containers, that empty container should label properly, what kind of sanitizers that containers contained. Okay, and we have to discard immediately with and properly means what? Uh, Even the containers, the containers, the sanitizer containers, they many most of the times actually they contain some remaining of the sanitizers, and we know that sanitizers are chemical and we cannot just discard all kind of chemicals. Many chemicals, they need some pre-treatment before discarding, so that means we have to follow all those regulations of discard. Okay, so that was all about the sanitizers. Thank you for your patience.